I'm Amanda Knox, and you're listening to Hard Knocks. I have a rule about gifts that I tell my family. Nothing plastic and nothing that makes noise. They always ignore my rule. On Christmas, my kids squealed as they opened up matching pink and blue plastic Walkie Talkies. Oh, joy. These things were cheap. LCD screens that reminded me of my first digital camera back in 2007. The kids, of course, loved them. The little picture-in-picture display, the press-to-talk button. Eureka, who's 4.5, figured that out quickly. Echo, who is 2 and change, is still struggling with the concept. Honestly, it doesn't matter. Eureka likes to talk, Echo likes to listen and absorb. Most often, she's announcing from across the house, "Hello, it's Eureka!" What could be more important to communicate than the fact of her own existence? Echo giggles at the face and voice of his sister, transiting across the impossible distance of the living room to appear in his hand. That's how it normally went, but I recently found them fighting. Eureka was talking into her walkie-talkie, which meant that her voice was emanating from Echo's walkie-talkie. So what's the problem? Well, Echo didn't want her voice piping through his walkie-talkie. Did he want to turn his walkie-talkie off? No. Did he want Eureka to turn hers off? No. While I imagined banging my head against the wall, I realized what was going on. Echo wanted something the walkie-talkie wasn't designed for: to share the presence of his older sister in a passive way, to give him the warm glow of her face without her voice invading his mental space. He's 2. He doesn't have the words for any of this, but he knew exactly what he wanted, and it helped me to see a kind of need or desire that we all have, and one that almost none of us will admit to: the feeling of connection without the weight of contact. You might say there are 3 ways to be. The simplest is alone. Your door is closed, your phone is face down, and no one else's needs are pulling at you. There's true peace in being alone when you choose it. When it's forced on you by a rejection or death or circumstance, it can be misery. The second way of being is also straightforward. Together. Eye contact, presence. You're getting the full sensory fact of another person, their voice, their mood, the way they occupy the room. Being together with someone demands that you actually show up, respond, and be affected. It can be incredibly nourishing or incredibly exhausting, depend on where you fall on the introvert-extrovert scale and how many spoons you have left that day. The third state is hard to articulate without a toddler making it painfully clear. I want you near, but not in. I want the warmth of your existence without the obligation to meet it. This can be a genuinely pleasurable way to be that isn't replicated by the other 2 ways of being. I think of what it felt like as a kid waking up in my bed at 2 a.m., knowing my mom was just down the hall, close enough that I didn't feel abandoned, far enough that I wasn't disturbing her sleep. Today, I think of reading a book on the couch by the crackling fire while my husband bustles about in the kitchen, cooking dinner. Perhaps you, like I, feel more productive in a crowded coffee shop, laptop open, surrounded by people who you don't know and have no obligation to speak to. Alone together. Together alone. That third way of being has genuine psychological value, and for most of human history, it was relatively hard to manufacture. You had to earn it. You had to be physically near another person to feel their ambient presence, which meant you were also available to them, which meant the line between together but alone and just plain together was thin and easily crossed. There's a parallel here to sugar. It's rare in nature, and for most of human history, our ancestors were lucky if they stumbled on a piece of fruit or a honeycomb. We evolved to want it badly because finding it was hard, and there were little downsides to craving it because its scarcity prevented overindulgence. Then, of course, we figured out how to concentrate and mass produce it. Combine that with our ancient and unaltered cravings, and you get the obesity epidemic. The third way of being is like that. The wanting of it isn't pathological. It's not some modern failure of intimacy. My son's tantrum, pre-verbal and instinctive, is proof enough that this desire predates smartphones. What Steve Jobs and Mark Zuckerberg and Jack Dorsey did was find it, package it, and sell it back to us at an infinite scale. Many of the platforms we've built in the last 20 years are, at their core, machines for manufacturing this third way of being. Social media gives us the feeling of being surrounded by people we know, their updates scrolling past like voices in another room, without requiring us to actually respond to any of them. Our group chats hum along with the ambient warmth of belonging while we ignore them for hours. We can now be with hundreds, thousands, or millions of people and accountable to none of them. The engineers who built these things didn't set out to sell us a substitute for human connection. I think they saw a real need, built something that scratched it, and then discovered the scratch felt so good that we couldn't stop. It's the same logic that put high fructose corn syrup in everything. If you give people the emotional sensation of company without the friction of actual intimacy, they'll choose it almost every time. Not because they're weak. It's just easier. Together but alone isn't by itself a failure state. As I said above, it can be genuinely pleasurable. It's the feeling of safety without obligation, of privacy without loneliness. It's the best parts of being alone and the best parts of being with people blended into something that is neither, but delivers both feelings. What I think is more familiar to most of us, I'm going to start again. What I think is more familiar to most of us is what this looks like as a state of failure. Two people at a restaurant, both looking at their phones. The failure isn't in the fact of inhabiting this third way of being. It's in the overindulgence of it at the expense of the other two states. When together but alone is always available, always frictionless, always one thumb swipe from wherever you are, you stop building the tolerance for real togetherness, which takes effort and skill. It requires you to listen, not just speak, to be porous enough that your own mood might be affected by that of your companion. Being together requires you to adjust yourself to another person, to sometimes be bored or irritated or surprised. At its heart, it requires vulnerability, a willingness to be known and to know. Overindulging in together but alone also saps your ability to inhabit true restorative solitude. It makes it harder to be without doing. When the phone comes with you into solitude, it eats up the silence in which you might have been able to hear your own thoughts. Its screen is a mirror that prevents you from seeing your own face. Together but alone is valuable, but I think it nourishes us less than true togetherness and true solitude, and it degrades our capacities for those ways of being. Just think of how good it feels to cancel plans, or how unthinkable it is to go to the bathroom without your phone. Here's the strangest part of this whole thing. Those cheap Walkie Talkies my kids got for Christmas, the ones with the crappy LCD screens and the press-to-talk button, they might be the most honest communication technology in our house. Old school Walkie Talkies have a protocol. You press the button and you talk. When you're done, you say, "Over." I didn't understand this as a kid. I merely absorbed it from cartoons. But that "over" is a crucial signal. I have finished, and now I'm listening. The other person can't interrupt. They have to wait. The walkie-talkie forces you into the discomfort of listening before you speak, of taking turns, of actually receiving what someone else says before responding to it. It's a constraint. and constraints are valuable. Most of our modern communication technology has stripped away constraints in an effort to make communication frictionless. You can talk over people in video calls, read a message and not respond for 3 days. You can mute someone, filter them, archive them, ghost them. Without the friction, you can perform the ritual of connection without ever actually connecting. Having something to push against alters the style of communication. It alters what is even worth saying. I have a friend who writes me pen and paper letters every week. Good old Jake in Portland. The act of opening the letter, reading, getting out my own paper to respond, all that friction gives me time to process. It actually enables me to leave that letter on the kitchen counter for 3 days and get around to it later. And when I do respond, it's a more thoughtful reply. I have the constraint of physical letter writing to thank for that. My son Echo didn't want to push against Eureka that morning. He wanted the glow of the screen. He wanted her face in that little square, present and pixelated at a safe remove. I get it. I do it too, every time I open my phone because I don't have the energy to sit with my own thoughts, nor the energy to actually be together with the people in my life. I'm human too. I feel the draw of that third way of being. Spending time there is nothing to be ashamed of, nor do I think we need to abandon all the technology that enabled this way of being. The question I'm asking myself is what happens when that's the only state we're ever really in, and whether any of the tools we've built are actually capable of taking us somewhere else. So far, the walkie-talkie is winning.